Alright, today we're going to be talking about genetic mutations. So first off, we're going to start with some vocabulary. We're going to define, well, what is a mutation? A mutation is any change in the DNA sequence. So any deviation from what you originally started off with in your DNA, any change in that sequence is called a mutation. These can be caused by errors in replication, which we've already talked about. When DNA is basically replicating itself, it's making another form of itself. Transcription. Whenever we process mRNA, if something is wrong, then it can create the wrong kind of DNA. Cell division. Maybe something doesn't divide right whenever these cells untie their chromosomes. Or external agents, and we're going to talk about what some of those external agents might be. Now, mutations in reproductive cells. These can be bad for not only the person that is having the mutation in their reproductive cells, but also for their offspring. So a change in the sequence of nucleotides within a gene in a sperm or egg cell. So that's the key. If you're having a change in your reproductive cell, it has to be your sperm or egg cell. If the altered cell takes place in fertilization, so if that altered sperm or that altered egg comes together, it will become part of the genetic makeup of the offspring, which can be detrimental if something happened that caused a bad mutation in the genetic makeup of the offspring. Maybe it might be born without a limb. That is a possibility. This might cause structural or functional problems of the cell itself, so as developing into an embryo, and the organism. And sometimes, if the mutation is bad enough, the embryo may not survive. Now, in some rare cases, a mutation may be beneficial. Something might happen to make a organism stronger or faster. Maybe they'll be able to process something quicker. The mutation can be beneficial, but again, this is in rare cases. Now, talking about a different type of mutations. Mutations do not only occur in reproductive cells, they also occur in body cells. So all non-reproductive cells. So for example, your bones, your skin, your hair, anything like that would be a mutation in your body cell. Now, a mutation can occur in the DNA. So what's making up your DNA, or what is making up what you are, your characteristics, sometimes that might change. Now, since this is a body cell, the mutation will not be passed on to your offspring. So will not be passed on to the offspring. This is something that will just be affecting you, the organism itself. The mutation can cause problem for the individual, however. An example of this would be skin cancer. If you have a mutation in the DNA that codes for your skin, you might end up with the mutation and you might eventually develop skin cancer. So our very important concept number one, this mutation can be as small as a change in a nitrogenous base. So we can have two types of mutations, which we're getting ready to talk about. Now, our two types of mutations. Our first type of mutation, we're going to have a point mutation. So just think about a point on a pencil. Very small, only occurs in one spot. This will be a change in a single base pair of DNA. So as simple as changing an A to a C or something like that. Very, very simple. So your example, we'll start off with the sentence, the dog bit the the dog bit the cat. So the dog bit the cat, we are all familiar with that kind of sentence. Now, changing one letter, we change a T to an R. Now the sentence reads, the dog bit the car. The sentence has a completely different meaning. It no longer means the same thing. Much as in a change in a nitrogenous base, going from a T to a C might change the entire shape of a protein, might change the entire function of a protein. That protein may no longer be able to function anymore in the way that it needs to be able to process something that it needs to in your body, or to be able to form something that it needs to in your body normally. You might lack some type of protein that might be able to digest something that might cause you a lot of consequences later on down the road. Now, the next type of mutation is going to be our frame shift mutation. So this is a mutation in which a single base, so only one, is added or deleted from DNA. So in this situation, you can have one base that is being added or deleted. Now, this one tends to be more harmful. The dog bit the cat. Now, we'll delete a G from the word dog. So now we're going to end up with the dob, it, heck, at. That doesn't really make any sense anymore. That's kind of a gibberish kind of sentence. Doesn't really have a meaning. However, all we did was we deleted one letter. Now, if we had added in one letter, it might change the sentence again, or it would definitely change the sentence again, and it would still be gibberish. So our very important concept number 2, generally, point mutations are less harmful to an organism. And this is because, once again, it's only changing that one letter. And in this circumstance, we can see how easily changing one letter can still change the meaning of a sentence, but comparatively to our frameshift mutation, where we delete a letter or we add a letter, will change the entire meaning of the sentence. We'll change it to the point where we can't even actually interpret it anymore. And what you have to think about is that from this point on, after that G is deleted or after another letter is added, the entire sentence is changed. It is off by 1 point. It has been shifted, which is why it's called a frame shift. Think of something like a picture frame. If you have a picture frame and you shifted it over 1, you might cut out a person, or there's something that's in that picture that would have been there originally. So chromosomal alterations. We don't just have mutations just in genes. Sometimes they can actually occur in our chromosomes. So chromosomal mutations are just structural changes in chromosomes. So these mutations can occur from maybe a part of a chromosome breaking off or being lost during meiosis or mitosis. This can happen. Chromosomes breaking and then rejoining incorrectly. If they don't rejoin correctly, then they're not going to be read correctly either, which will cause a change in your structure and in your characteristics on down the line. Now, this is especially common in plants. However, it does happen in every organism. Remember, we talked about homologous chromosomes. If you add a piece or delete a piece, they will not pair correctly. So homologous chromosomes do not pair correctly when it is missing a piece. So this means that gametes, the embryo that's starting to form, might have extra copies of some genes and a complete lack of others. So this might be those instances in which we looked at non-disjunction. So remember, we looked at it and we said that non-disjunction is whenever it gains an extra pair or an extra chromosome. This is what's happening. It does not pair correctly when it's missing that piece, which means it has to have that extra copy, or in some case, a complete lack of others, like in Turner syndrome, where the female is actually missing an X chromosome. So our big number 3 is chromosomal mutations are not often passed on to the next generation because normally the zygote usually dies. So normally the embryo, the zygote, whenever it is fertilized, it will usually die, and it will not usually be able to continue on with the fertilization process and grow through meiosis and become eventually into an organism. Now, what causes these mutations? We know that we're having mutations, but what will cause them? Some of them just seem to occur, but sometimes we have what's called a mutagen. And a mutagen is any agent that can cause a change in DNA. And I'm sure that you can probably think some right off the top of your head. For instance, UV light, any kind of radiation. So radiation, gamma radiation, that's a great example. Chemicals, and even high temperatures can be a serious problem. Now, some mutagen, like X-rays and UV light, can break apart DNA. So they can actually dissolve or break apart that double helix structure of the DNA. That might cause deletions, which would lead again to your frameshift mutation. If something is being deleted, if a nitrogenous base is being deleted, that will lead to frameshift mutations. Now, some mutagens can actually convert a base into a different incorrect base, which would again just be like your point mutations, just changing the dog bit the cat into the dog bit the car. Convert a base into a different incorrect base. Chemical mutagens, for example, like asbestos, you've probably heard a lot about asbestos being in the walls of certain buildings, cause substitution mutations. So again, just changing that from maybe say a T to a G, that would cause a completely different reading in those nitrogenous bases. Vic number 4, mutagens are everywhere. You can find mutagens everywhere. Walking outside alone will expose you to UV light, which is a type of mutagen, which can cause skin cancer. Or being in a building that was built maybe 50 years ago, that might lead to you breathing in asbestos, which can cause a chemical is a chemical mutagen and can cause a substitution in your DNA. Now, not all hope is lost. We can still repair our DNA. So repairing DNA, the cell processes that copy our DNA are usually accurate, which is great because we need to ensure that accuracy to be able to pass on the correct information to our offspring and to the following generations. Yet mistakes sometimes do occur. We've seen that. We've talked about what our different types of mutations are. Now, repair mechanisms that fix mutations in cells have evolved. We've come across and we've developed enzymes that will be able to actually go in and replace our incorrect base pairs with a correct one. So enzymes, similar to a book editor, indeed, they are going to proofread the DNA and replace incorrect nucleotides with the correct ones. So they're going to go in and they're going to fix that A, and they're going to make it into a G, which it should have been to begin with. These work extremely well, but again, they're not perfect. They rely on how much our body is actually able to produce them and continue producing them and making them capable to perform their jobs. Now, these work extremely well. They're not perfect, again, because the more exposure that you have to a mutagen, like the more instance that you're outside sunbathing, or if you're just outside in the sun and you're not wearing sunscreen, the more exposure to a mutagen, like UV light, the more likely that a mistake will not be corrected. If you continue to expose yourself to that UV light, it only makes sense that you're going to continue to have those mutations in your DNA. As you continue to have those mutations in your DNA, those enzymes that are proofreading that DNA might eventually miss one, might eventually lead to that development of skin cancer. That's why skin cancer doesn't happen overnight. It takes a little while for it to start to develop. Now, Vic number 5, what should you take away from this? Limit your exposure to mutagens. If you know that you're going to be outside for a long time, put on sunscreen. Smart tactics like that.